time. Hi, this is JP Morgan. Welcome to the Slanted Lens. We've got this dialed in. We know exactly what we're doing. So I'd love to talk about the A7 IV today. I have it in my hand. I've got it with it, the 24-105 f4 G Master lens. I've been shooting with this now for a couple of weeks, and it's been a lot of fun to shoot with, and I've been very impressed with it. If you have any questions, please ask any questions. Love to talk about it. 33 megapixel camera, 10 frames a second shooting on this camera, which is excellent. It has 4K up to 60 frames per second, 10-bit 422 codec. You know, it's become a standard for these cameras. It's finally, we broke this barrier. For years there, we were waiting for a good 10-bit 422 codec on cameras, and it was like everyone kept teasing us. It's always 8-bit. 422, I mean, it took a while, but now it has become standard. No one's going to release a camera from here on out that they want to be taken serious in any kind of commercial application that doesn't have a 10-bit 422 codec. So this one definitely has that. It's an excellent camera. Gives us that codec, which really makes this, I feel like, because of the way it is positioned, 33 megapixels, it puts it squarely in the wedding photography video market. This is a perfect wedding camera because you have a large enough megapixel, a large enough sensor to be able to give you a great print, to make great images from your wedding. It also has great video if you want to shoot some video for your wedding. Just really is an excellent camera for that application. So if you have any questions whatsoever, I'd love to answer them. So feel free, put them in the chat. Julene will ask them for me here, and we will continue to work on the A7 IV.
Can this camera do live YouTube streaming?
Can this camera do live YouTube streaming? That's a really good question. Of course it can. You know, but when you ask that, you always, is it made to go automatically and have the codec to be able to go directly to YouTube? I'm not positive about that. I don't think so. Most of these have to have some kind of a connector to be able to make that happen. It's not built into the camera. You have to use Sony software. Sony has a software that will allow you to go live, to be able to use that software to convert the signal to go live. And that's what you'd have to do with this camera. I could be wrong about that, but Julene's looking it up and she'll let me know here in a second. But we can go live with it if you use Sony software. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Canon just came out with that software not too long ago as well for their cameras to be able to have that live web access for all of their camera line. So Sony's had that for a while. One of the first ones that did that was color-wise. The color is fabulous with this camera. It has a great grip on it, which I absolutely love. The smaller mirrorless cameras, I was using an A6600 just last couple of weeks ago. I can't hold that and feel confident when I'm holding it. This has a great grip that just gives me a place to put my fingers. Feels very comfortable. I do have a hard time getting my finger over to the record button, but maybe I just need to stretch my finger a little more. I don't know. But that's the only thing that's a little awkward for me on this camera. It does have the dual cards. Why can't I open it? And there we go. We have an SD card, and this is an interesting kind of Sony application here. You can use an SD or a CF Express. You can use either of them in this slot, and that really makes this so that you can either use two SD cards or the CF Express. CF Express is a great card platform, and really the direction everything is going to go. The manufacturers are slowly moving us into it, you know, so they're going to help us get it kind of accustomed to that thought and move us into CF Express cards. Because in the end, they're faster, they carry more data, it's just a better platform. I think they're sturdier. SD cards have always, I don't know, they just a lot of times feel so fragile to me. And I know people say, oh, you shouldn't buy expensive SD cards, you know, and I'm going, well, I buy a lot of tough cards just because I know they're indestructible, you know. And I've had SD cards that have not survived very well. So, any other questions on the A7 IV?
So, do you find yourself switching to wider lenses because of the 4K 60 crop in the A7 IV in real world situations?
So the question is, do I find myself switching to wider lenses because of the crop, 4K crop on this camera? You know, is that correct, Julene?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my feeling about that is that I love shooting on a wider lens to a really kind of mid-range. The 2470, Tamron makes a 2875, which I think is kind of a nice place because it's a little wider, but it also almost gives you a portrait type lens. But this is a 35-105, and a 35-105, I feel like I wish it was a little wider, but in saying that, I feel like it's wide enough for most of the applications you're going to do. If you're shooting contextual kind of portraits where you want to see the environment, 35 is pretty wide. When it crops in, yes, I'd rather be on 24. So I think the answer to your question is, really depends on your application, and I would be thinking about that if I'm going to do a contextual kind of interview and I want to see the room and things around them. I'd probably go to a 24. I wouldn't go to a 16. I don't think it's necessary. I think you can get what you need. So it is 60 frames a second. I do feel like, and this is just my kind of sense about this, is that we are really going towards workflow for video. 120 frames a second is starting to become kind of the standard, because people want the ability to shoot that 120 frames a second. You'll be able to speed ramp it and work with it, and it's a style and a look that's out there that is very, very common, to be able to do that kind of zipping in and out and move around, and it's just a fun way to work. So 60 frames a second is good. So the question was, what's the screen, pop-out screen? This does have the pop-out screen, which I think is very interesting. I have strong opinions about pop-up screens. I can't stand it when I hear people talk about pop-out screens. Well, if you don't vlog, you really don't need the thing. I'm going, are you kidding me? As a cinematographer, I use a pop-out screen all the time. If I stick this camera in an oven, if I put it in a mailbox, if I'm going to put it up in the corner. I heard a gentleman speak who had shot as a DP on television shows his entire life. And he said the reason he bought his first Canon was because of a pop-out screen, because he could shove that thing up, see exactly what he's getting, he can frame it. It's quick. You don't have to have an external monitor to be able to make that happen. So I think a pop-out screen is super important. This screen is a little underpowered, not underpowered, but resolution isn't as great as it could be. I mean, it's about 1,036,000 or 32, I guess. Whereas the R6 is 1,620,000. So it's 50% more than 50% more details. So that's not great. But the EVF in this camera is fabulous. The EVF gives you a really great look, and you can see very clearly what it is you're getting. It's a little hard with these cameras when you get in tight to be able to see that EVF. I'm so used to cinema cameras that have a bigger viewfinder, and so that's kind of a disadvantage of the DSLR or the mirrorless kind of world. But it's a mirrorless world. This is a small package that you can put on, you know, your gimbal. You can use it in so many different ways. I just think it's kind of the perfect camera with regards to weddings. We shot a lot of live action with the eye tracking, and that eye tracking was completely on. I mean, it was with it, both in stills and in video. So that was very impressive. The Kodaks, well, I've got a complete review of the R4, no, not the R4, the A7 IV versus the R6 that's coming up next week. So we'll have that out, and you'll be able to see exactly what I think between those two. But I was very impressed, actually very, very impressed. And the color was one of the things that I loved. It's something that I think is very, very strong with this camera and excellent. So,
do you think the new LCD screen is so much better than the A7 III?
Oh, do I think the new LCD screen is so much better than the A7 III? You know, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that, and we looked at the A7 III so long ago, I'm not sure about the resolution comparison on that, and I'd have to look that up. So, not sure how to answer that question.
Okay, how many shots?
But it's got to be better. Sorry, as I look at it here, it has to be better and a better application. But I still think Sony's cheaping out a little bit on those screens, and I'm not sure why they're doing that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So, questions there, Jolene?
Okay, how many shots did you manage to do until it depleted?
You know what, when it came to frames per second on this camera, it says 10 frames per second, but it really, you can't get 10 frames a second on this if you're shooting full RAW on the camera. You can't. They have a RAW that has been, it's dumbed down. It's a compressed RAW. On that you can get 10 frames a second, but you can't get 10 frames a second if you're shooting a full RAW. It's about 5 or 6 frames a second if you're shooting RAW. If you're shooting JPEG, you can shoot like crazy. You know, that's not a problem. But really, if you want to get 10 frames a second, you have to shoot a compressed RAW on this camera. So, but I was able to shoot and get well, check out the review that's coming up next week. We'll explain all those things and give you a really good answer to that. Any other questions on that before we move on?
I think we're good.
All right. Excellent camera. Loving this camera. And I think Sony does what Sony always does, and that is that they really over-deliver when they give you a camera. And I think that's incredible. I did mention this one little knob right here. It used to be your compensation dial. Now you can program that to do whatever you like, and I think that's really great. It has a lot of buttons you can program, makes this camera so it's very customizable. Okay.
I was referring to real life number of shots with one battery.
Oh, number of shots with one battery. Oh, you know what? I am very impressed. I shot on one battery an entire day, all the reviews, everything we did on this camera for an entire day, the video, the images, and we were shooting all day long. I didn't change the battery. I didn't change it once. Now, I don't know exactly what that number was, but I was impressed with the fact that we didn't have to change it over. And I was kind of happy about that because I only had one spare battery between the camera I was shooting with, which was the A7 RIII, and the camera that we were shooting. So anyway, so I think the battery life on this is incredible. That was such a, in the beginning with Sony, that was such a problem, but now has become, I think, a strong point.
I noticed your portrait download. What do you have?
Oh, somebody's asking about our portrait download. We did release a portrait download a couple of, I guess a month ago. That has a complete selection of portrait settings, kind of portrait setups, different types of lighting diagrams. It gives you examples, it gives you posing examples, it gives you the ability to see exactly how to set up and shoot from posing to shooting. It really is an incredible look at portraiture photography and how to set everything up and to make great portraits. So it's definitely worth it. If you go over to thesunlens.com/ well, go to the store at the top and you'll be able to find that. That's our portrait download. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. All right, moving on to the Nikon Z9. What in the world is everyone complaining about? I hear the Z9, and what do I hear? Whoa, it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, and it doesn't have SD cards. That's like saying my electric car doesn't run on gas. This is a camera Nikon is looking forward with this camera. It's not going to be mechanical shutter. It's not going to run on SD cards. It's a camera that is going to deliver on a much higher level. It's 45 megapixels, but it's going to give you fast shooting. Do I like electronic shutters? I don't like electronic shutters because I just don't know if I shot anything. I took 1,000 images. I had no idea. But it's just the way I've worked for my entire career. It's going to be the future. This camera really looks to the future. We are not going to stay with SD cards very much longer. We're not going to stay with a mechanical shutter much longer. Biggest issues a lot of people say is, well, it's strobes. Strobes don't sync very well. You have a hard time getting a sync speed with that electronic shutter. If you test it, and I have not tested it yet, Nikon's not dumb. And they have resolved that issue, and you'll be able to sync with this camera because that's what Nikons do. It's a very large camera. It's got that heavier camera battery pack on the bottom. It's more of a robust type camera, which, you know, you can love that or not. Like the 1DX, it's just a bigger camera. And for that, you have to decide if that's your workflow. If you are going towards mirrorless and want smaller and smaller, that Nikon is a different direction. The Z9 is a bigger, more robust, heavy battery, shoot forever kind of camera. But I think we got to get over the fact that it's CF Express cards and it's not SD cards. You got to get over the fact that it's electronic shutter and not mechanical, because I think that's actually the advantage of the camera. We're going to move forward with regards to that application, and that's kind of where I think we're going to see ourselves going. So
what do you think of the screen at the back?
The screen at the back. Well, you heard me a second ago. What do I love about this? I love a pop-out screen because if I'm doing video and I want to put this thing in places, I have that option. That camera, the Z9, I'm looking at the screen going, wow, I'm a little confused here. It does kind of pop out and do all kinds of weird things, you know, and it just looks to me like something you're going to catch and rip off the back of it. I don't know. I thought that was a bit of a mistake, a misguide by them. I think that should have a pop-out screen so you'll be able to use it and switch it around or turn it over if you want to protect it. And that just gives you a much better application. So many more ways you can use it. I don't love the pop-out screen on that camera at all. I do love the 8K. Oh, I did want to say this about it because you've got that 8K video. Why is 8K video important? You know, a lot of people say this is ridiculous, and it is ridiculous on some levels for a lot of people. It's a lot of information to move around. It's a big file sizes. It takes up a lot of space in your storage. It takes up a lot of space on your cards. But the reason 8K is really great for me is if I'm shooting an interview with an individual, I can set a camera up on 8K, and now I can punch in to a tight shot and punch out to that wider shot on the 8K, and I can still export at a 4K and get an 4K export. So I think in that way, that 8K makes a lot of sense for workflow. If you're doing really professional things, you want to export at 4K, you kind of need that 8K to be able to make that happen. That's why 4K was so great. In 4K, you can punch in and out, and you can still do a 1080p export. So it just makes it a lot easier to work that way. So I think in that way, that 8K makes a lot of sense, and I think we're going to see 8K becoming more and more the standard. We're talking about megapixels and video, and it's like how many frames per second, and I mean, camera manufacturers are just competing, leapfrogging over each other. I feel like everyone's waiting for someone to make a stand, like Sony made a stand with the A9 or the A1, and then immediately, you know, Canon released theirs, but then Canon said, but our really good camera's still coming, the R1. So I'm kind of excited to see what the R1's going to be all about, but that's a personal thing. Anyway, so I think Nikon Z9 is a great camera. I love Nikon's color science. I love the image quality. I think they have just beautiful images. They've had a little bit of a struggle keeping up with regard to video and getting integrated into the whole process. I think it's just hard to compete out there. Canon has had a foothold in that, both on the cinematic side as well as the DSLR side. Got caught behind when it came to mirrorless, but are catching up now, and I think that that's going to be hard for Nikon to stay in that game. It truly is. All right, any other questions on the Z9?
Why do you think Z9 has no uncompressed RAW? Because of double optical low pass filter.
You know, no, that is an interesting question. What was it? Again, the question is, why does it not have an uncompressed RAW? I'm guessing that on that sensor and that camera size, that uncompressed RAW is just out of this world large. It's just a crazy file. So in order to move that around and to use it, I think we're now at a point where that sensor is going to give you too much information that doesn't make any sense any longer. So it'll be interesting to test that. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I'll look at that when we get our hands on it to be able to answer that question more completely. That will be really interesting to look at. It was interesting when I looked at the R6 versus the A7 IV with regards to image quality, the difference I saw between those two, between a 20 megapixels and a 33 megapixel image. So check that out in next week's lesson. I think you'll be very interested to see what we found there.
So
all right.
Saying, I don't think the Nikon Z9 has, no, it has blinking edges instead of blackout that lets you know you're shooting. Does it have that?
The question is, has blinking edges rather than blackout to let you know you're shooting? I'm not sure. We have not gotten the camera yet. We look forward to getting a hold of the camera and we'll review that. That's something we'll put on our list. Thank you for that. All right, so there's the A7 IV and there's the Z9. Moving on. What is it? It's a unboxing. What do we have? We have a Tamron 28 to 75 millimeter lens. Yes. This is a pretty exciting lens, and I'll tell you why. This is a very reasonably priced lens, and Julie's going to tell me exactly how much it is. It's $899. This is the second generation of the 28 to 75. This is a G2 from Tamron. The G1 was incredible. It just is an incredible small form factor. It's that 67 millimeter lens filter size on the front. Small, lightweight. I like the 28 to 75 because I like a little closer to that portrait type lens, and the 75 gets me there. But what is really interesting about this lens, and $899, yeah, we got that, $899. What's interesting about this lens is that it's completely programmable. This is the future of lenses now, because a lot of the electronics, a lot of the features on this lens are handled through the menus inside the camera. You can now plug this in, and it's got a port to be able to plug this in, and you can take, and on this lens, you can completely change the way everything works. Now, on some camera manufacturers, Canon for one, they have their focus ring up front, the zoom in the back. You can change these two. You can change them to have the same configuration. You can change the direction of the focus on these. If you don't like it to focus from right to left, you can go left to right. You can change all of those features on this lens. But on top of that, it's a very sharp, incredible lens. I look forward to testing it, which will be something we'll be working on here the next week or so. And I just love how compact this whole series has been from Tamron for the Sony mirrorless camera system. So it is a full frame lens. It's made for full frame cameras, but it just gives you that great 28 to 75. But G2, some advantages here that are really pretty astounding. Any questions on that, Jolene? Oh, the one thing, the magnification on this thing is incredibly close. You get about to 7 inches, 7.1 inches, which Tamron's been doing this on this entire line. The ability to get in and to focus so close. So either on that 28 or even 75, you can get in pretty dang close, but at 28 you can get down to 7 inches. So you are 7 inches, to understand 7 inches is from the sensor to your subject matter. So if you look at 7 inches, that means your subject matter is right here. It's right at the lens, which means you're focusing very, very close. Is it a macro lens? No, it's not, but it's starting to give you those macro type capabilities. It's very close in that it's a capability. It does have a focus lock button on the side, which is excellent. That's something that's new for Tamron, and I think it's really needed to be able to make this lens more usable on set. And it's more of a video type lens. This is a bit of more of a video type application. The lens is going to focus a little better. It's going to work in that video world much better. So I'm excited to shoot this and to be able to have that experience. So 2875 by Tamron, another great Tamron lens that coming out. We'll do a complete review on that. And if there aren't any other questions, I'm moving on.
Does this lens have Type-C cover for the port? Imagine water rain getting in there.
Interestingly enough, it did not come with a cover on the port. Did not. I noticed that as I pulled it out, and I'm not so sure. I bet you're going to need to be able to get something to cover that up. That's a really good point.
Is it that much better than the first version?
You know, the chromatic aberration, I mean, the first one is great. This one is a step up. What I would do, if it's not, I would definitely do this. If I had the first version, which I do, which I'm going to keep, but if I were wanting to get this and money was an issue, then I would sell the first version because it's still selling for around $800, I think, on B&H. I'd sell the first one for $400 or $500, and I'd spend the $300 extra to get into this new lens because you're going to like the things it'll be able to do, and it's going to help keep your system upgraded and moving forward. If you have an A1, this is a great lens for that A1. It truly is. All right. Boom. Photo tip of the day. I was listening to this guy, Jason Walker, last night, in a little group that we had that got together. And, putting it on backwards, he said, and I thought it was a great idea, when you shoot with an on-camera flash, and this is my FJ80, most people put it up here because they want to bounce it, or they turn it backwards behind them, so it bounces it, but all that light is coming in straight at your subject matter. If you turn this over to the side, now you can bounce that off the side, it comes in, and rather than being behind or above, it's off to the side, and it starts to give you some drawing on your face. If you shoot at aperture priority, and you underexpose by one stop, TTL with this, now that TTL gives you the light you need on the face, but you're basically underexposing the background. And that's the concept is really simple, and it makes so much sense. You're underexposing the background by a stop, but you're giving the TTL the correct light on the face. Practice with that, see how it works. I think you'll like it, and it's a great way to shoot weddings. His name was Jason Walker, just did great advice. So, all right. Photo tip of the day. All right, I talked about the 24-105. You know, it's interesting. 24-105 has been, and this is this lens right here, the new one from Sony. It's always been a go-to video lens, 24-105. It's an f4. And it's really interesting to me that f4 is a tough place to be for me. I like to be 2.8 starts to feel like just the amount that starts to feel like nice backgrounds falling out of focus. I really love 1.2 lenses, and so it's really hard. An f4 lens is a little bit of a disadvantage, but for video this has been used a lot. This really does become a wedding photographer's kind of kit right here. You got the camera, gives you great Kodaks, great video, gives you great stills, and you got a 24-105, which gives you everything from that wide to a little more to portrait to a little bit of a telephoto, which really makes that an all-around great wedding type lens. If it was a 2.8, that'd be great, but it'd also be about that big around, and that really wouldn't work. So anyway, 24-105. Okay. You know, I have to take a couple of comments here, and I know the show's going long, but